The movie begins in 1930s Korea, with Suk-hee preparing to move away from her home and move into the estate of a Japanese heiress, Lady Hideko. In part 1, Suk-hee is taken on a long ride until she reaches the large estate in the countryside. A woman greets her and gives her a tour. She is told that she won't sleep in the servants' quarters, but near the lady of the house, as she is her handmaiden. She calls Suk-hee to Mako and tells her that the lady is often tasked with reading for the master, her uncle, and that he loves books. Suk-hee is then showed a room which is just across from the lady's bedroom. When left alone, Suk-hee tries to peek into the room, but a loud noise scares her back to her tiny cot. Later in the night, Suk-hee awakens to hear the lady Hideko screaming. She rushes into her bedroom and comforts her. Hideko says she had had a nightmare and tells Suk-hee that her aunt had hung herself from the big cherry tree, and on moonless nights, her aunt's ghost dangles from the branch. Suk-hee proves to be a good handmaiden as she comforts the lady. Suk-hee then tells us, through voiceover, that we think she is a Korean handmaiden named Tamako, but she's really Suk-hee, a pickpocket raised by a woman who teaches children how to steal and commit forgeries. In a flashback, we see the house takes in abandoned newborns and sells them to Japan. A man enters the house of thieves and tells a story about an interpreter who bribed his way into a translating job for the high officials. He helps Japan annex Korea and then gets naturalized so he can marry the daughter of a Japanese noble. He builds a mansion filled with books and invites Japanese collectors to his library to hold readings of rare books and auction them off, but doesn't want to lose possession, so he hired him to create forgeries. He has convinced the nobles he is Count Fujiwara from Japan. The collector has no one except her wife's niece, and she performs book readings for her uncle. This niece is rich. She has 1.5 million in cash and 300,000 in bonds, and the man who calls himself Count Fujiwara plans to make her fall in love with him, and after marrying her, he'll declare her insane and have her locked up in a madhouse, thus inheriting her fortune. He wants Suk-hee to work as her handmaiden so she can persuade her to fall in love. Her uncle also wants to marry her for her money, but if Suk-hee can convince her to marry the count, he'll give her 50,000 and the dresses and jewelry. Suk-hee demands 100,000. Suk-hee goes to the estate to meet with the staff to convince them to hire her. The women who work on staff steal her shoes as a prank, which angers her because it will make her look bad. She is amazed to see how beautiful Lady Hideko is. Suk-hee gives her a reference letter from the last woman she worked for, but in reality, it's a forgery by the man who is pretending to be Count Fujiwara. He has written it in Japanese, which Suk-hee can't read or write, but he had told Suk-hee with the letter. Lady Hideko claims she has a headache from all the reading and asks Suk-hee to read it. Suk-hee struggles to do so from memory and then finally admits she is illiterate and can't even read in Korean. Lady Hideko said she doesn't care if Suk-hee curses or steals, but she doesn't ever want to be lied to. Suk-hee tells her that she has heard the count say he dreams of her face in bed. This was her first attempt at planting a seed of a relationship. As Lady Hideko goes to the reading, Suk-hee goes through all the dresses to see what clothes she'll inherit. After the woman is locked up, she finds a sex toy. After trying on hats, she finds a rope in a hat box, the kind you'd hang yourself with. Suk-hee goes outside and looks up at the cherry tree the lady's aunt was said to have hung herself from. Suk-hee finds Lady Hideko reading in the library with her uncle. She tries to approach but is told not to go past the snake. A gate is rolled closed, locking her out. She isn't allowed to cross the limit. Back in her room, Suk-hee bathes Lady Hideko, giving her a lollipop which she says she used on children to help them associate bath time with sweetness. Lady Hideko complains one of her teeth is sharp. Suk-hee grabs a thimble and begins shaving it down. In that moment the two exchange sexual energy. Count Fujiwara arrives at the estate to help with forgeries. Suk-hee and the count discuss their plan in private. Suk-hee tells him the lady is naive and won't take the hint that he wants physical relation. Count Fujiwara says she has to put it into her head that the lady is much happier since he arrived. Suk-hee presents the gift of sapphire earrings given by Count to the lady and was happy to know that this will be hers after she goes away. Lady Hideko arranges for Suk-hee to be dressed up. Lady Hideko finishes off the look with the sapphire earrings. They button each other's dresses up, which again created a sexual tension between them. When Suk-hee asks if Lady Hideko is planning to marry her uncle, Hideko points out that's what he raised her for, knowing he'd need access to her money one day. The Count paints with Lady Hideko, trying to be flirtatious. Suk-hee watches, feeling sorry for Lady Hideko. He tells Suk-hee a peach is ripe, which is the signal for her to start convincing the lady that she's falling in love with the Count. After he leaves, Suk-hee claims the lady's cheeks have grown flushed since he arrived, but the lady isn't really convinced. Lady Hideko and Suk-hee have a personal conversation on the grounds about how the lady's mother died in childbirth, and she feels like she is being punished. Suk-hee takes this to heart and tells her no baby is guilty of being born, and that her mother would probably have been very happy to have given life to her. This surprises and touches the lady. The Count arrives and steals the lady away, sending Suk-hee to run errands so they can be alone. Not wanting to leave Lady Hideko with the Count, Suk-hee rushes to grab things, but when she returns, both seems intimate. Now Suk-hee harbors anger at Lady Hideko. At night, the servant's bell is rang, and Suk-hee is called into the lady's bedroom. She asks Suk-hee why she didn't greet her when she got back from her reading. Suk-hee is obviously still bitter, but claims she simply fell asleep. The lady says she can feel a nightmare coming on, and suggests Suk-hee sleep in bed with her. After a while, she tells Suk-hee that the Count asked to elope with her when her uncle leaves to visit his gold mine. The lady says she's never been told what men want. Suk-hee teaches her how to kiss by demonstrating on her, and ultimately the two women end up having sex, both claiming it is simply an instruction, although they both seem to be in love with the other. The next time the Count is painting with Lady Hideko, he orders Suk-hee to find another job to do. Suk-hee follows suit, but then stops short, saying she has no other job except to look after the lady. Outside the grounds, the Count yells at Suk-hee for not helping him with his plan. He tells her he's not going to let her fuck it up. Suk-hee threatens to tell her everything, but he threatens, in return, to tell her about Suk-hee, thinking that she can't return home empty-handed. Suk-hee responds by saying Lady Hideko has no one on earth, and if he frightens her, she'll close up. Now Suk-hee follows the plan accordingly, telling Lady Hideko that she is falling for the Count, but the lady says she's fallen in love with somebody else. Nonetheless, Lady Hideko agrees to marry the Count if Suk-hee can go with them to Japan. The Count pretends to leave, but secretly hides so he can sneak off with Lady Hideko. As soon as her uncle is gone, Hideko leaves with the Count and Suk-hee on a ferry to Japan. Once there, Hideko and the Count are married. The next morning, Suk-hee stops by their room and finds blood on Hideko's sheets, alluding to having lost her virginity. By the end of the week, Count Fujiwara is missing, claiming that he has gone to certify the marriage and convert the inheritance into cash. When he returns, Suk-hee yells at him for taking her virginity and then leaving her alone. She tells him to hurry up and throw Hideko in the madhouse. Two men arrive at the hotel and ask Suk-hee what treatment she would suggest for Hideko. Suk-hee says she wants her confined to a place where she can do no harm. The group travels into town, stopping at a mental hospital. Suk-hee waits with the employees as they tell the Countess they are going to look after her, but then they end up grabbing Suk-hee and taking her into the madhouse. She claims she is not the Countess, and they have the wrong woman. The Count and Hideko do nothing to defend Suk-hee as she struggles. Then in part 2, we learn about the backstory of Lady Hideko. As a little girl, she has to put metal balls in her mouth, while she is hit repeatedly by her aunt for talking back. Hideko's aunt instructs her in Japanese by reading books which end up being graphic, and teaching her words like penis and vagina. Her uncle comes by and grabs both of their faces, suffocating them before letting them go. We now see the young Hideko slapping a servant for saying bad things about her in Korean, which she can speak. Her uncle tells her that she has a touch of lunacy, and he will try to teach her, so she doesn't get sent to a mental hospital. The training consists of her being taught to read from his book collection, which is now revealed to be very explicitly sexual books. The young Hideko reads from a graphic story, and her uncle yells at her lack of articulation. We then see the adult Lady Hideko at the readings for collectors, reading from sexually explicit passages. She flashes back to the day of her aunt's hanging and the servants staring up at her. Meanwhile, the readings continue for the Japanese book collectors, and the stories are more and more graphic. She also performs demonstrations of the material for the audience. The books are auctioned off. One has lost its value because the sexually explicit illustration has been ripped out, and nobody wants to buy such books. The man who pretends to be Count Fujiwara is involved in these readings, hired for forgeries. He tells Hideko's uncle how all the women on the estate are attracted to him, except for one Hideko. He suggests to him to go easy on her training or she'll be dead inside. Count Fujiwara and Lady Hideko talk over dinner. He tries to tell her he loves her, but she knows he's lying. He admits to being the son of a Korean farmhand, and he spent 3 years learning to paint forgeries, so he would have access to her and possess her father's inheritance. But he realized how smart she was after he met her, and has another deal to suggest he'll rescue her from her uncle. They'll split the money. She says she doesn't want to marry anyone. He realizes she plans to kill herself, but he says all her money would go to a perverted uncle. She points out that he will find them if they eloped and take her to the basement where he tortures people. He has brought her there as a young girl, and showed her what he did to her aunt. Count Fujiwara gives her highly concentrated opium, and says if she's ever caught, 3 drops will make her sleep, 5 drops will knock her out, and all of it will kill her. They plan to find a handmaiden for her who they will send to a madhouse under Hideko's name. They get rid of her old one after she is caught having sex with the Count. We now see Suk-hee's arrival from Hideko's perspective. When Suk-hee tries to peek in her room, she bangs against the wall, scaring her. Then she screams to get Suk-hee to come, claiming she had a nightmare. Hideko reads a letter from Count Fujiwara telling her to show Suk-hee her clothes at every opportunity, since that is part of what she will receive for helping him out. He points out she won't be able to read the letter she's reading because she's illiterate. Hence her asking Suk-hee to read the recommendation out loud. She knew she couldn't read it. Hideko also goes outside and scolds her servants for stealing Suk-hee's shoe, saying if she runs away, she'll throw them out. When Suk-hee presents the earrings to Hideko, Count Fujiwara wrote her a letter warning her that Suk-hee would pretend they were fake because she wants them, but they're actually Hideko's own earrings. He tells her, to keep her from getting suspicious, they should occupy Suk-hee with the task of trying to convince Hideko to marry him, and that she shouldn't fall in love with him too easily. As before, Hideko gives Suk-hee the earrings and admires her when she is dressed up. Also as before, Suk-hee is very kind towards Hideko when she discusses losing her mother in childbirth, leading Hideko to feel a companionship towards Suk-hee. Count Fujiwara and Hideko really don't like each other, and both only tolerate the other to go along with their plan. Suk-hee now mopes around, angry, watching a flirtatious exchange between Hideko and the Count. Now we hear them openly discussing their dislike for each other. Suk-hee becomes jealous, which Hideko notices. As before, when Suk-hee is away running errands, and when she returns, they stage that pose just to convince her they were falling in love. We see Hideko giving the readings of sexual literature to the Japanese men, and the men applaud. The lady feels bad about arranging to have Suk-hee locked up in a madhouse, but he provokes her. Now, Lady Hideko is convinced that Suk-hee doesn't really have feelings for her. In her room, Hideko asks Suk-hee if she still thinks she should marry the Count, even if she ends up having feelings for someone else. When Suk-hee says yes, Hideko slaps her and shoves her out of her room. Then she grabs the rope that Suk-hee found in the hatbox earlier, and goes to hang herself from the same tree her aunt had, saying she wishes she'd never been born. But when hanging from the tree, before she can fall, Suk-hee appears, holding Hideko by the legs. She immediately confesses to everything. How she was trying to trick her into marrying the Count, and they were going to send her to the madhouse. Hideko asks, Suk-hee, are you worried about me? And Suk-hee asks how she knows her name, since she's pretended to be a handmaiden named Tamako. Hideko confesses her plan to send Suk-hee to the madhouse. Now Suk-hee writes home and tells the woman who raised her to be a thief. There is a change of plans, and they need her help with a forgery. Hideko's uncle drives away to visit his gold mines. He warns Lady Hideko about the basement. With him gone, Suk-hee is finally able to explore the library. She sees the uncle's collection as all perversely sexual literature. Offended that Hideko had been forced to read it, she tears pages and illustrations out of all the books and then dumps them in the indoor ponds underneath the floorboards. The two women are finally free, preparing for Hideko to elope. Cut to Suk-hee being put in the madhouse. Instead of sadness, Hideko is seemingly unaffected and says she's hungry. Now in part 3, Hideko and Count Fujiwara dine at a nice restaurant, their plan having worked. Meanwhile, Suk-hee laughs hysterically while eating dinner at the mental hospital. At a photography studio, Count Fujiwara explains that they'll replace Suk-hee's photo on her ID with Hideko's, so she can take on her identity, and Hideko can be declared in a mental institution, allowing them to recoup her inheritance without being caught by her uncle. The Count confesses he might actually like Hideko and suggests they get married again. Now that she's stolen Suk-hee's identity, she inquires whether he feels remorse about having locked Suk-hee in a madhouse alone, but he says she's naive and deserves her fate. In the madhouse, a fire is set allowing Suk-hee to escape. Back at a hotel, Hideko dips the opium the Count gave her into a wine glass. They start kissing. She drinks from her wine glass, hoping he'll follow suit, but he doesn't. Finally, she drinks from his glass and kisses him, transferring wine from her mouth to his. He then gets really aggressive towards her, but before he can harm her, he passes out from the opium and the wine. When wakes up, he is being taken by two thugs somewhere into town. Now Suk-hee and Hideko have reunited. Suk-hee has taken a picture of herself dressed as a man and uses her forgery skills to replace the photo in Count Fujiwara's ID, taking over his identity. Hideko sends a letter to her uncle, telling him that the Japanese Count who he had been trying to impress for years is actually the son of a Korean farmhand, and she drops him off with her uncle as a gift. Now that he knows he's been betrayed, the uncle takes the man who pretended to be Count Fujiwara to his basement and tortures him. The Count asks for a cigarette. The two women go to the train station. The uncle's goons are there, checking for any women traveling together who are trying to leave town. The women go undetected as is currently disguised as a man, so they aren't seen as two women. In a flashback, we see that the Count didn't really take Hideko's virginity. In present day, Hideko's uncle exposes that he had a perverted fascination with his young niece and wasn't simply after her money. He admits he's just an old man who likes dirty stories. The Count ignores him, asking for a cigarette to help his memory, which Hideko's uncle grabs from the Count's clothes and he smokes. The two women have made it to the ferry. Suk-hee gets rid of her mustache now that they're safely en route to Shanghai. Before the torture can continue, the Count says that the cigarettes were filled with mercury, and they both are now poisoned from the smoke. The uncle dies. The Count inhales the air in an effort to kill himself, and finally Suk-hee and Hideko are free.